when I was a little kid, I always was interested in what is this all about? You know, the big questions.
Sometimes I'd wake up very early in the morning and just sit outside because it was so quiet.
Sense of loneliness, sense of isolation, sense of running out of time. That's always kind of been in the back of my mind.
I wouldn't say any of us were Buddhists then, but we were slowly evolving into something that was Buddhism.
As the clouds pass through the open sky, as the teardrops from your starry eye, as the birds over the ocean fly, as the earth devours all things that die, as the baby blossoms on the tree arrive, as the sun comes up, the world comes alive, as a little seed sprouts deep inside, as the grass green grows far and wide, as the cool wind blows through the still of the night, as the earth vibrates and makes it feel alright, as the full moon pulls on the rising tide, as the light shines bright and you cannot hide, as the truth can no longer be denied, as you surrender to love and let your heart confide, as your thirst is quenched and you are gratified, as your everlasting soul is purified. Bear witness. Bear witness.
Everything has two sides. So, unfortunate side is we lost the country. Fortunate side is Dharma went all over the world.
I grew up in Tibet. Do you know where Tibet is?
China?
Tibet, yes.
Yes, yes.
To a certain degree, maybe we were just too comfortable up there in the mountains, in the land of snows, and doing your own little thing over there. To be sort of shaken out of that state, to investigate furthermore something is good for the Tibetans also.
Hey, how are you? No place to sit. ¿Cómo estás? This is the action man.
Anyone would have mentioned Buddhism 10 years ago, I'm like, okay, whatever, you know, let's go party.
When I started reading about it, I thought it was really depressing. It was like suffering and the cause of suffering, and you know, I'm 19 from New Hampshire. I wasn't really thinking about suffering very much, so I thought, no, I don't think I'm interested in Buddhism.
It seems a little odd that a tradition that's been hibernating in the Himalayas could be so relevant to a modern Western lifestyle, but fundamentally it is.
Well, because they're dealing with the same exact issues. You know? Why am I so sad?
However, the civilizations over the last 2,500 years have changed. The human emotions and human neurosis, in essence, has not changed.
The Buddha asked all these questions, like the Buddha's main question was, you know, how do you find happiness in this? old age, sickness, death, you know, uncertainty, suffering.
It was a totally incredible thing for me to come in contact with a tradition that 2,500 years ago, a normal person like us decided that he was really going to take a serious look at this question of suffering.
You spin around at the party?
I was born into a place of profound privilege. I mean, just mind-blowing good fortune, you know, was the world I was born into. So, you know, we didn't really have any problems. And yet we still suffered.
When I was about, I guess, 17, I ran away from home, and I pretty much was a street kid for about 4 years. Those times I was hitchhiking in the desert, or I was just totally alone and going through like really hard times, you know, there on the side of the road just getting rained on, you know. Probably then was probably like the first time that I actually thought about anything about, you know, how I am as a person, how I relate to other people, how can I help other people, and how we're interconnected and all that stuff. You know, definitely at that point, you know, you see people, they got all this stuff, and it's like, well, shoot, I ain't got nothing. I'm pretty well fine, you know what I mean? Like, what's up with that? So that kind of made me question some things.
I don't even think being a nun is the best thing for everyone. It's just, for me individually, it's just very helpful. My greatest obstacle? First, understanding Tibetan culture, that was really difficult. And getting used to it and being able to feel comfortable. And being a woman has been very difficult. Here at the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics, in my class, I was the only woman. So I was very, very lonely sometimes, extremely lonely.
When I was first locked up in that county jail, literally when the cell door slammed shut, it was like just a kind of a total awakening to all the denial I'd been in about so much of my life. And my son was 9 years old at the time, and just, you know, I was just devastated by the decisions I'd made and how I'd let my teacher down and my family and the community and so forth. And it was just like undeniable. And so I just became, you know, driven to radically change everything.
It doesn't matter what role you play, what condition you're in, because conditions are very unreliable. Sometimes the universe is smiling upon us, and sometimes it changes. That whole world is learning that there's no certainty, there's no security.
A cascade of selling swept over the markets. By just after 3 o'clock, investors were just dumping shares.
Everything's happening so fast, it's unbelievable.
The illusion of control that we've had in modern Western culture is largely disintegrating. And the experience of reality we have now, where you don't know what's going to happen next.
Unbelievable display of Mother Nature. It was frightening, it was also awe-inspiring and otherworldly.
Other cultures have that. I mean, that's just the way it's been throughout all of human history. And that does open the spiritual gate.
To imagine Buddhism taking root in the culture of the 1950s or even early 1960s, impossible. There was just this monolithic American culture. It was unquestionable, it was successful, it was unchallenged. It really did feel to me from the time I was about 4 or 5 that I'd somehow gotten dropped into the wrong family.
Whatever we've been told is the truth, the way the world functions, what we are, all the givens through childhood. At some point, are dissonant with something inside of us.
When I was quite young, when I was 15, I remember becoming aware of being aware. One night I was sitting out on the roof of our house at the lake. I was listening to the pine needles, the white pines, they're dropping onto the roof. Something changed for me about life.
I mean, that's how people were back then. I mean, they were coming out of a very strict sort of world, and this just was this seismic shift that was happening for people.
We were part of a generation of people who basically said, I want out. That impulse was certainly selfish. It wasn't, I want to save the world. It was, I want this suffering to stop inside of me.
India was kind of flavor of the month. The Beatles had just been, and everyone wanted to go to India. And, you know, Baba Ramdas and Timothy Leary and these people had to popularize this whole idea of Eastern spirituality.
I was not going to India for tourism. I was really looking for something. I really was fed up with Western culture. I said, I really need something new.
And I heard about these buses that you could get on and go from England to Nepal, drive through all these countries that, you know, you think about driving through now, like Iraq and Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan.
We didn't think about the dangers, we didn't think about the risks. It was what we had to do, we had to do.
I had absolutely no idea about Hinduism, nor Buddhism, or nothing really. And then on the way, I met one American, and he had been already with the Tibetan lamas in Nepal. And he was talking to me a lot about Kathmandu and Nepal and all the Tibetans and the Tibetans and the Tibetans.
High in the Himalayas, Tibet's religious tradition is personified by the Dalai Lama. These are films of the Dalai Lama taken in less troubled times. News now reaches the world that 20,000 Tibetans have risen with him against their Chinese overlords.
2 days after the Lhasa uprising, the Dalai Lama escaped from his palace. The Dalai Lama's escape sparked an exodus of refugees as tens of thousands of Tibetans followed him into exile.
In 1959, he came from Tibet.
It took almost 1 month, all time walking. We walk all the way.
And then sometimes we came to Snow Mountain, day and night, on horses. Sometimes caught by Chinese army. It put us in the short period prison.
When the Dalai Lama left Tibet, I was still in high school, and somehow I heard the news on the radio that he had left Tibet and entered India, and somehow there was some sense that this was something special.
Thousands crowd the railway station in New Delhi to welcome the Dalai Lama. Speaking in Tibetan, the Dalai Lama charges that the Tibetan people are being exterminated, that their culture and religion are being stamped out.
actually this cultural revolution, destruction in Tibet, actually proved for us the really value of Buddha's teaching.
Okay.
When I first arrived in Dharamsala, I struggled up the hill with my rucksack. I came to a large rock on which were written the letters Om Mani Padme Hum, but I didn't know what they were. If we go down to this, to here.
But this is
Oh, look at that. I lived in there. On my
Dharamsala in those days was really just flattened tin cans and little shops, people selling their old clothes and stuff.
It was a one-horse town. There were no jeeps, there were no cars.
This is this Tibetan Amala who I love, that's me. It was really the Tibetans that got me. The main thing was just the warmth of the people, that feeling of joy, and I could not figure it out because most of them had lost everything. Some of them had seen their own families killed in front of them.
They're working on roads. That was what I found amazing about Tibetans, is this ability to adjust from being a prince or a nobleman to having nothing. We found that all of our preconceptions, the things we had been trained as children, as to what was proper, what was desirable, were not desirable.
I became close and attached to the Khyentse Rinpoche and spent, I don't know, 13 years non-stop with him. There's a Tibetan expression that you cannot stand parting away from someone like Khyentse Rinpoche. Even like in the day, you know, just to go away, you feel you are missing something very precious. And that's not very common in life.
When I got to Kathmandu, I heard that there was this Lama there named Karmapa. I was really fascinated by him and started going to see him. And so I thought, well, he's a monk, I should become a nun. That would be following his example. And that was really why I became a nun.
When I went first time to Nepal, and first time I met the Dharma, that was in Kopan Hill. There was a Lama teaching, and this Lama was Lama Thupten Yeshe, and he would teach in English.
You cannot jump, you know, such inner freedom, sort of, you know, lie, you know, sort of, you know.
He had this kind of odd English.
Cannot jump like this, you know.
That he'd learned from hippies.
Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa first taught Westerners in '71. And it just started to blossom, these Westerners climbing up the hill over rice paddies to get up there. We had a month of teachings and then contemplating on these teachings.
Although, you know, since you're born, you know, up to now, you said, you know, my mind is dead, my mind is dead. You have no idea what is your mind. Isn't that silly? Every day using my mind, that blah, 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 blah. But you don't know what is your nature of your mind.
And that was a shock for me, because I had never thought that you could have wisdom, you know, like without thinking. And I was sick of thinking. I mean, I was completely sick of my thoughts and my mental state, and I was looking for some breakthrough.
So that really it gave you the opportunity to work with the nitty-gritty of the mind. I mean, I think that one of the big realizations for me during that month was, yes, the mind does have the capacity to change.
We'd read quite a few books about Tibet. Tibet was somewhere that's very kind of remote. But then kind of news got around amongst people that there was going to be a Lama was going to turn up in Kensington. To have a Lama turn up was quite extraordinary because we never imagined that would happen.
Well, I was in the market for a teacher, and an old friend wrote to me and said, I'm coming to Los Angeles with this great teacher and you absolutely must see him. He spoke in a downtown, really shabby old Embassy Theater, I think it was called. And he walked on the stage and I was electrified.
Sit on the cushion, but don't make a big deal about that. Now you're going to meditate. Just sit down and relax.
When I met Trungpa Rinpoche, I probably cried for 2 hours. You know, a sense of having met something that was so deeply precious to me and not having any idea why.
Trungpa swept through America just like a rocket. He starts traveling all over the country. He teaches right away, all the time. He knew when the Chinese invaded Tibet, it wasn't just a question of taking the teachings out and putting them under your robe and getting the hell out of the country. It was a question of bringing that living wisdom to a brand new culture, thousands of miles and a completely different language away.
And giving up, opening, surrendering from that point of view actually plays a very important part because finally you begin to actually let go of your aggression and you begin to hear much better and see much better. When you give more and more of this uptightness of holding back and resentment.
A Dharma that was not some kind of specialized, cloistered, monastic Dharma, but a Dharma that was fully integrated with society and with life.
He dove into Western life. He drank, he smoked, broke all the rules.
People were always so outraged by him.
He was a fantastic artist as a calligrapher, as a flower arranger, as a photographer, as a writer, as a poet. And that was one of the things that was enormously attractive about him.
The interesting finding is that in Tibetan tradition, there is no word for artist.
And so he was immediately working with a new energy, the energy that said, okay, tell it to us, give it to us, tell us what to do, we'll make it happen. And he had every confidence that we would get it.
I spent a lot of time in some kind of retreat context and also traveling with him. And then I'd go off and be a crazy person, smuggling cocaine in South America. It was actually coming back from Japan with Trungpa Rinpoche that I got pulled aside. I knew I was either going to go on the run or I was going to prison for a long time at that point. And he told me I should stay and face it. And he said that even though if I was in prison for a long time, I could still practice and I could still work with him as my teacher. It wasn't until years later in prison, really, that I was able to finally do what he'd been asking all of us to do for a long time, which was really do the practice and really integrate it so that we weren't just trying to get this contact high from him, but to really be able to generate that within ourselves.
I remember when I came back from India and I wanted to go to a Tibetan place, and the only place in the entire country was in Freehold, New Jersey. And then you think about what there is now.
It was as easy as putting Buddha in Los Angeles on Google search, and a couple of centers came up.
No, then just with the gold, not the base gold. I've always, my whole life, been against real estate. I grew up with these great teachers, never owned anything. And always these teachers telling us, Padmasambhava said, if you want to go down to the hell realms, have students and a monastery. That's how we grew up. Even this place, none of us have any clear idea of how it happened.
A very strong group of people that were friends. We started a little group. We just practiced and studied together.
Rinpoche would come. She came back yearly, and the students became more and more, and then it became known as the Baltimore Retreat.
And they ended up paying a lot of money for every rental place that the retreats were held.
I said, we're paying so much rent, we're doing so much work, why don't we find someplace permanent?
And then they called me to come and look at the land. Or there was no strategy or no something, anything. It just happened. We walked in through the door. There was a husband and a wife who were living here. It was a hot day. There was a nice swimming pool. There was a horse stable, which they envisioned to have retreat rooms over there.
You have to get the zoning board to give you an okay, and then you have the whole county council. The zoning board meeting, one of the members said, can you tell us how Buddhism relates to our Lord Jesus Christ? So I gave a little talk about impromptu, saying we're all basically looking for openness, compassion. The next meeting, and the place was packed. There was people who had strong objections to us being here, but by and large, everyone there, the council said, no, this is about religious freedom. You have to let these people here. At that moment, I said, no, I'm proud to be American.
Since then, it's been done, and we've been having our annual retreats over here.
I do liken the sort of spread of Dharma from India to Tibet that happened between the 7th and the 10th century to when it went from Tibet via India to the West. Marpa and the great translators, they did make these arduous journeys to get to India. They walked for days, months even, and they went back again and helped spread the Dharma.
I mean, these guys had it tough, you know, but they did it, you know, and did a good job of translating it from Sanskrit into Tibetan. And did it without Microsoft Word and any other kind of editing processes. Most of my training is so far is in Tibetan, Tibetan grammar, get a little bit of history, some Dharma, a little bit of debate. It's just getting started. For me, I got the easy way, you know. I got dictionaries on my computer, all kinds of stuff.
It's astounding to think that, a year ago, we couldn't read a line of Tibetan. Khalchen Rinpoche was with us he taught us the letters, he taught us how to say the sounds, he taught us how to write the letters.
One thing that I thought I can actually do to help the Buddha Dharma transplanted in the West is to train a group of students to become Dharma translators. Tamal tarbe tartukshin, debe dagi chame bar. I thought, since I'm going to be giving the traditional training to my son, why not sort of invite some of the students to sort of join him. The last time when I went to see His Holiness Tunku Khyentse Rinpoche, he told me, your son, regardless of whether he becomes a monk or a lay practitioner, make sure that he becomes a teacher of Buddha Dharma.
My upbringing was non-traditional. I was maybe 10 years old. He was in the living room, and I walked up to him, and I was on the floor. I kneeled and said, Dad, what is the nature of mind? And he said, okay, I'll show you. So look at me. Look at me very closely. And a few seconds passed. A few more seconds, I started thinking, what should I be looking for? What's going on? And suddenly he shouted flat out in my face, one massive cry, and my mind my body was paralyzed, and my mind completely cleared of everything, just out of pure shock. And he said, see, that's it. That's it.
Do you know that herb packet room?
What herb packet, honey? We also didn't push him in the Dharma. Rinpoche also wanted to give him a Western education and then gave him the choice of what he wanted to do after school.
Actually, it was a very logical choice to not go immediately into college and to go to the Himalayas to study. If I'm going to go on the route to a Western education, I want to at least have this seed of happiness.
To me, Tibet is like, for I guess 1,000 years almost, you had all these brilliant masters. Every generation produced these legendary meditators and scholars. It just staggers the mind to imagine the combined willpower and brain power that was directed towards the single goal of developing spiritual technology for freeing the human mind.
You probably had more books in Tibet than you did in any other society. They were manuscripts, so there was maybe 1 or 2 copies in the entire country. But they contained teachings that would disappear if that 1 copy was disappeared. So we began a project in India. Tibetans would come in, and they say, I have this manuscript. We'd say, okay, we'll buy 20 copies of it. So they took it out, and they had this old technology where you'd have the glass plates, They'd sit and these books then became the basis of what we studied. But there was a problem. They're disappearing, they're fading. Then I decided, well, why don't we do something else? So we put it on the web. We've got over 10,000 volumes that anybody can download. The word for emptiness is what's called tongbanyin. Tongbanyin. Where do we find tongbanyin? See, it's found in 966 texts.
If we look at this expansion of Buddhism coming out of Asia, and then we see Buddhism has already evolved. It's not stayed static anywhere for the last 2,500 years. It's always assimilated, adapted for the particular cultures and so forth. Now it's adapting to world culture.
The point was East-West meeting. I feel not on religion, not as a religion, but simply the science of mind and Western science.
I've had the conjecture that looking at brain changes associated with meditation is something worth doing for decades. It is, I think, quite remarkable how close a parallel there is between our modern understanding of neuroplasticity and the Buddhist notions of transformation. In simple terms, neuroplasticity means that the brain can change in response to experience.
And I'm just going to line up and come straight down. Land the first sensor. Be sure the midline is set correctly. For meditation, for example, prefrontal cortex, is one of the main areas that we look. So left and right.
Our brains are constantly being shaped, wittingly or unwittingly. And we can leave the shaping of our brains to happenstance, or we can take more responsibility by actually training our mind in a way which will promote more healthy qualities of mind.
They did my brain test. They invited to America brain test, and finally my picture came out on the that's National Geographic on the cover.
And so now we see, as in this Mind and Life meeting with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we see that traditional Buddhist teachings are brought into a completely modern, contemporary context.
Now, Alan has talked in detail about what he presented as the truth.
This is a time when the Tibetans also can benefit from the strengths of Western culture.
And training in the four immeasurables.
Religions are always changing, and there's a huge change when you cross a cultural frontier.
There's always the core in the Dharma that brings me back, but there are cultural influences that put me off. Particularly around some women's issues.
There's a lot of denial and ignoring, because it's painful to know that the religion you've given your life to has this really major flaw. The male privilege of Tibetan Buddhism traditionally, it's incredibly intense.
Male chauvinism is one of the oldest habitual patterns in the world. And I don't think it's going to go that easily.
You look even here, in this Western community for this ceremony, there's not a single woman in the front row. When you set up your whole system so that women don't end up trained well enough to sit in the front row, there's a problem.
Right now, there is no Geshe degree for nuns. Geshe was basically a degree that, well, monks get, usually monks get when they have studied the main 5 texts. There's a lot of debate about giving that title to nuns who are now doing the same studies.
It's really, it contradicts Buddhism. It's not helping Buddhism. it's actually interfering Buddhism. And these are the sort of the cultural habits, if possible, should go.
That is one of the major things the West has to offer the Tibetan Buddhism, is a new way of seeing women and a way of examining the cultural influences on the Dharma.
Because we perceive true existence, because of that very powerful mind, ignorance, that colors all our experience.
I have traveled so much in the world, and I have seen that until and unless we give equal opportunity in terms of education, in terms of anything, for women, we are not going to achieve very much.
So in this sense, you could say with karma, of course, strictly speaking, karma means action. So action has threefold.
Buddhism must fully integrate into the 21st century. We can't just take it as a museum piece.
The system doesn't port over perfectly the system that they'd set up there. It doesn't mesh perfectly with our society.
Everything seems to be very flashy, coming from just like, wow, all these paintings and like stuff like that.
When I first came and saw all these white middle-class Americans bowing to this Asian man, I'm like, this is so weird.
The form of the religious form, why is it you have offerings? There was an irritating quality of it, where I always have to look at the chart. But that's what I mean, I have to look at the chart. It's not integral to my being.
These questions of how much is culture and how much is Dharma. Definitely distinctions need to be understood by the student. I would really encourage the students to really do this, but I would think Western people are wasting their time when they are ironing the scarf and trying to unfold them and fold them. That's a bit of a waste of time.
Even I thought before, tradition I thought not that important tradition. Now when I really look, tradition is very important. Like, example, remembering the root text. I thought many Westerns, why need to remember the text? It's too much energy. In West, we not do this anymore.
All phenomenal appearances, without exception.
Choki Nyingma Rinpoche's whole kind of thing he has going on is this idea of scholar practitioner, and he emphasizes that in every teaching he gives.
When we grow up, the teachers say, if you not remember root text, you're empty. Anybody asks any question, say, wait, where's my book? Sorry, today I can't say anything because my book is not here, my notebook is not here. So everything needs to be within yourself.
I like challenges, so this kind of thing where you can just practically, it's a very pragmatic religion, you can work on yourself in a way every day, every moment of your life.
Be present. Be now. Be awake. No matter how. Be warm. You're free to give. Drop illusion and learn to live.
Less intensity, ego might not like it. So when you have the high top peak intensity, ego is so enjoying.
Coming to the Dharma is no problem. You can come from anger, you can come from jealously, you can come from woundedness, you can come from curiosity, and you can come anything you can come. Once you come, then you have to be open. You cannot hold on one thing. You have to be open-minded. Then you see how the path goes.
As Buddha said, my form, my dream-like form appeared to dreamlike beings to show them the dreamlike path that leads to dreamlike enlightenment.
One more time. I love it. It's like a nectar for me.
My dreamlike form appeared to dreamlike beings to show them the dreamlike path that leads to dreamlike enlightenment.
I'm in Mexico. I'm wearing the Mexican style of dress to show where I am. The masala, you sit somewhere here.
I travel with Rinpoche mostly when he travels to the West, which means Europe, the Americas. And so I get to be in a very close proximity with Rinpoche and not only listen to the teachings, but also seeing how Rinpoche puts the Dharma into everyday life.
I can be staying in my student house or friend house or hotel. I try to act like I'm sitting in my home. Stylish hair. Okay. You go into that, you ask a question, I answer. So all the time you feel connected with me.
Entonces, después de este retiro, Rinpoche también ha creado...
Whatever limitations we might have as to our space, this is how I am, this is how I deal with things. When you are with these people, they sort of like ask you or do things to move you away from that comfortable point, right?
That's why I'm actually pushing slowly pushing.
It's intense. It's just their way of manifesting their wisdom. It's just about being natural all the time.
Thank you very much. I enjoy a lot.
Rinpoche does a lot of his activities quite spontaneous. And so I was thinking that we're going to be late, you know, kind of in the morning. Rinpoche is calm, as he always is, and calms me down, of course.
So good to have you here.
Yes, thank you.
Good.
So we're almost ready. Okay. Wait 5 minutes more? Yeah?
In the 21st century, how to teach. You don't have to change teaching. You don't have to change the meaning of teaching. But it's just a matter of how to present.
Welcome. I would like to introduce meditation.
We exist in a state of perpetual interdependence.
Watching spinning samsara.
The Interdependence Project.
Honestly, if Americans' only option was to study completely traditional Tibetan Buddhism, I don't think many people would be interested in Buddhism.
I haven't registered.
Okay.
We came to the open house last week.
At the same time, what we found at the Interdependence Project is that people want teachings to be accessible and relevant to their life. They don't want them watered down.
Welcome to the Interdependence Project. Mindfulness practice is the basis of what we'll be talking about for the next 10 weeks.
Perhaps the Western Buddhist teachers would have an easier time to communicate with Westerners because they all share the same cultural language, value system, and even philosophy too.
I started out being very conservative as a Dharma teacher. But I actually am starting to feel that it's not very good for Western students to try to encourage them through a path that has so much form. And the reason is that their lives are already so packed with form. It wasn't that way in Tibet. In Tibet, there's a lot more space as a culture, but in the West it is. Every minute is filled with form, and so give them more form doesn't really seem to work that well. So we're going to do a practice now that involves breathing into the lower belly. Feel the space opening. In-breath, filling the lower belly, medium to full breath. through the body work, what we find is it gets Western people out of their heads.
Notice the sense of emptiness.
And when you live in your body in that way, it's so much more compelling and liberating than thinking.
I knew I really wanted to do this retreat center. From the age of 19, I'd always been asking permission to my teachers, but I felt that I had a different experience as a Western woman and that I needed to honor that. I had to make my own decisions and my own mistakes and see what happened, at least here at Taramandala. There's this sort of neo-generation of people that really realize they don't want to go into the corporate world and that they want something substantial and inner.
And I get there, but then it's like my heart stops again, and I can't do anything.
And those people are attracted here, and then they become practitioners. I'm kind of a funny combination of being very traditional and at the same time very experimental.
A bit angry, sad, fierce.
Angry and sad and fierce. It can't be Tibetan Buddhism forever. You know, it has to become the Vajrayana tradition as it's expressed in the West. But I always struggle with these questions because I have such a respect for the tradition. I love it. I don't want it to be harmed or diminished. And I want to make sure the depth is happening. Taramandala, that's my primary goal, is depth practice.
It seems Sangha is like family. Every Sangha, every community have their own personalities. Basically, there's something for everybody. My love of Buddhism was one of the first memories that I have. I believed for a long time to be spiritual is to be very serious and to not enjoy life. So I had lots of those concepts and ideas that I had to drop. And then the way I'm teaching, I let go of lots of beautiful forms. It requires tremendous sense of effort, activities to have lots of images, big altars. So I'm quite lazy and also in some sense minimalist. It's not me delivering another lecture. This is about going inside, open our heart and be honest to ourselves. One of the questions that we might like to ask is, why am I not free right now? So I let go of lots of forms and focusing more the heart of Buddhist teachings, which is very profound yet very simple.
You know, the foundation is the Four Noble Truths. There is absolutely no way you can get any understanding of the Dharma without it really being sort of squeezed from the essence of a thorough understanding of the Four Noble Truths.
What are the Four Noble Truths? In 4 words, there's suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path.
From the Buddhist perspective, we're all trapped in this sort of wheel of existence called samsara. The idea is, this is sort of the first noble truth, that life is suffering.
Going about things in the old ordinary way will lead to suffering, period.
Lookout Productions.
I feel like people spend so much time focusing on like their career or their bodies or what they look like. I mean, hello. We spend like such little time focused on our minds.
Today's my last day of work. I'm going to meet my other friends for going away drinks and dinner, and it's gonna be really fun. And I just can't believe that I'm actually done and it's actually happening. And I hope I don't screw up and miss my flight or anything. I need to cancel my Equinox membership. I need to...
The first noble truth is a quality of pervasive dissatisfaction, let's say. That agitation and discomfort are inevitable. Suffering is inevitable. We're all going to die. We know it intellectually. Yeah, sure, I'm gonna die. But tonight?
How do you feel about me going on retreat?
I think I'm gonna turn into the Unabomber.
Can I have a drink on my tab?
My teacher used to always say, listen to the sound of sadness and the heightened resonance of laughter. Suffering is like that.
I would define suffering as a condition of the mind that involves an inaccurate perception of reality, which leads to disturbance that is in the mind, in the brain, and in the body.
At times, it seemed like I was having a great time. But I was really depressed, really, in the back of my mind all the time.
What I call new epidemic is, alienation, loneliness, depression, disconnected feelings. Even everything is in a kind of pragmatic world, it's all taken care of in one's mind. Lots of suffering.
The inner experience of my sort of inner engine racing through my day, at its worst, can be incredibly painful. I can move into a mode where I feel like I'm actually perpetuating the problem. Like I'm really making it worse. And so I go and I feel like I'm feeling bad, and then I don't want to feel bad, so I kind of reject the fact that I'm feeling bad, which means I'm not really being present with what I'm really feeling, which is feeling bad. And then in the meanwhile, I don't want anybody on the outside to know that I'm suffering. So I try to keep a really cool look, like, hey, everything's fine, there's no problem.
That's perfect, that's perfect, that's perfect.
So, I've got my children and my wife and my colleagues that I work with, and not to mention people that are sharing the road with me as I race down the street in my car feeling this way. 2 screenings on one night.
About like 6 months ago, I was applying to business school, and I just really couldn't do it. And I realized that I really wanted to do something else with my life. So I'm gonna be gone for 5 months. Long black sweater thing, long body sweater. Body sweater, yeah. And I'm gonna be doing a retreat by myself, basically in the mountains. I'm gonna go before I have kids and a house and a mortgage. I'm gonna go and really focus on myself before it gets too crazy.
For human beings, it's very good to understand subtle discontentment in every moment. And that's the core quality of suffering that we all have. And so when Dhamma says everything is suffering, it's that you're looking at.
The combination of speed of instant gratification, it's very painful. And all my struggles up to that point and even today deal with the fact that I want things to be fixed in a certain way.
You're entitled to be happy all the time. I mean, that's the fundamental message of America, I think, the American dream. If you get more, you'll be happier. If you get different, you'll be happier. And that if you're not happy, something's wrong, and we can fix it. We'll fix it with a product, we'll fix it with a medication, we'll fix it with entertainment.
The expectation that if we just try harder, we can hit the pleasure button, you know, and we'll get the M&M is going to fall down the chute. It really is very compelling way to spend one's day, you know, from one thing to the next.
And that it's not okay to be restless, to be empty, to be bored, to be sad, to be angry. That's just not okay.
I've been this place. I say, it's only you focus to yourself and your suffering. And your suffering is the most biggest in the whole worldwide. We have 1,000 people dying by hunger, but you don't see that as suffering. Definitely is ego. Focus to your ego. Who taught that? Buddha Shakyamuni taught that in his teachings. You want to reduce your emotion, reduce your ego.
So this is my 16th year at the Institute of Buddhist Didactics. The first 10 years I really struggled. These studies, they're like an analytical meditation. We go through, we analyze it, like how does it apply and how does it really work? And you just totally apply it to your own life. There's just no way around it. All the difficulties I went through, I mean, of course there were lots of external circumstances, like when my classmates didn't treat me the way I wanted to. In the end, it was really my self-grasping attitude that was in my way. I mean, it was like I got angry and yeah, it was totally that. So my main obstacle has always been self-grasping mind.
Or it's like pretty much me and my own biggest obstacle is what it comes down to, you know. And it gets discouraging, you know, especially when I first started learning Tibetan and it's hard and I'm just like, no one understands me and, you know, whatnot. The wandering brains and my thoughts and everything, you know, it's pretty much me, you know.
So it's like so much preciousness in your life, then any small scratch, any small things, maybe like small hindrance, you cannot take it. You want to preserve me perfectly, but there's no perfect.
And I think the culture have gone so much into emphasizing your needs, your rights, your fulfillment over anything and everything being served.
And then we have suffering because it doesn't work, because you have impermanence. And the me program never quite works. It never works out.
If only we realize that all compounded things are impermanent, we will not shop as much as we are shopping now. And because of that, the earth is going down the hill, ecology has a problem, world is going crazy because of the economy, and all because we forget.
This culture don't want to talk so much about the impermanent reality. So all talking about solid reality.
Investors also poured into gold, which rose $61 Monday.
You think world is permanent, beautiful, something, but then it's not like that. So our mind have a natural tendency that will go into black and white. It's not a black and white.
Things are not the way they seem. And that's the basic issue. That's what Buddhism is all about. Things are not what they seem.
Class in 2 hours and haven't read anything.
Okay. Well,
So, of course I'm gonna miss you.
I'm gonna give you a big virtual hug.
No, virtual hug. Figure out a way.
And then I'm like incommunicado on Sunday.
Okay, so we got time.
Okay, yeah.
How do we get happy now? That's the third noble truth.
Some people say, oh, Buddha never spoke of happiness. Well, the whole Four Noble Truths is about the absence of happiness and how to get rid of that. So what do you get in the end? Genuine happiness.
Well, I can put Demigore and G.I. Jane.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I would call something.
I have really dark hair, by the way.
We're all clear.
There's certain moments as a practitioner that there are times that I can feel very good, very free somehow, very free. Enlightenment, I don't know.
Very strong view, then of course practice. So that's why yoga was very important for Imam. They say like that. I don't know.
The seed of happiness is to completely let go of the attachment to the ego. And it seems a little contradictory to find happiness for oneself by forgetting oneself. It seems to let go of that attachment would be absolute joy.
And then you already receive all the lessons.
The inner work that you do, if you really engage with the Dharma, I believe strongly now that that is true happiness. It comes from within you. It genuinely comes down to how you are and how you see the world and how you choose to respond. And you have your episodes and explosions and revert back to the past, but you get a way of looking at that.
I'm assuming that enlightenment is when you are absolutely free from all kinds of fixation, obsession, paranoia, judgment.
That stuff is extraneous to who we are. Do you know what I mean? So when whatever it is that's extraneous falls away, there's this natural way of being.
The most amazing miracle, the best fun that you should not miss in this journey called human life is actually that. Coming across this extraordinary openness inside you, this sudden realization in which that everything is suddenly clear.
we do experience this all the time. It's the quality of just being present in our body right now. The point of meditating is to notice them.
I'm in this cell block with 5 cells, 2 men to a cell, and it's just chaos, radios and TV and yelling and screaming and fights. I couldn't sleep. I was having nightmares. My mind was constantly racing through all these scenarios of how I couldn't have gotten caught and what I could have done. You know, my mind was just crazy. But I was sitting. I remember one night I'd been sitting probably 4 or 5 hours, and my mind just kind of stabilized in a very powerful way. Even at that moment, there was just absolute chaos. But my mind wasn't moving. My mind wasn't being moved or drawn to any of it. And at that moment, there was a tremendous sense of confidence that arose, that no matter how difficult this prison journey was going to be, that I could do it.
Buddha himself actually said, when he was asked what is the way to the enlightenment, he said meditation. In the beginning, you might like to pay attention to breath. Simply notice that you're breathing in and breathing out.
And whenever you notice yourself thinking, whenever you realize it, label that as thinking, but then gently bring your attention back to your breathing.
So you can close your eye, open eye, doesn't matter.
Pueden mantener los ojos cerrados o abiertos, no es importante.
You create space or not space, doesn't matter. You let go. I say, now I'm going to think spaciousness, rest there, like that. That's it.
Imaginen el espacio que está.
The meditation practice, it develops. Then you see the Buddha's teaching become alive. The spacious around you become a whole like universe space, like looking to your blue sky.
Y sientan cómo este espacio.
In Sanskrit, one of the translations of the word meditation is familiarization. Virtually all forms of meditation involve the meditator becoming more familiar with her or his own mind.
Why does my mind work that way when I could, okay, what do I have to do to change it so it's not making that same mistake over and over again, getting me into trouble and making things lousy? I know when I do this other thing, things get better and things are expansive and I'm happier and everyone else around me seems to be happier. So just literally mind training. It's a practice. I mean, I think it's a really good word for it. Over and over again, daily. The more you do it, your mind and your body literally like it, and like food, like oxygen, and look forward to it.
The reason why I'm in this path and why I wake up every day and I think about meditation and I think about sitting and I actually do it is because this very moment, I want it to be one of openness. You sit for 10 minutes a day, that's great. You sit for 30 minutes a day, that's great. You sit for an hour a day, that's great. What if you sit for 3 months?
I don't know how the me that was like in New York in a great apartment, going out every night, smoking, drinking, whatever. I don't know how that person had enough chutzpah, I don't know, something, to be like, I'm leaving everything I know.
In the beginning, it's very tumultuous usually. It's like you can't relax with more than 10% of your mind. So you're kind of still managing your experiences. Then after some time, you can experience maybe 20%. It's like you relax a little bit more. Then maybe 30%. And then you go through periods that are very, very difficult. Sometimes after a while, you can just completely relax and it doesn't matter what happens.
I just came in from the snowstorm, and that's my teapot going off. And I'm gonna make lunch now.
We think, again, we're leaving life, but I really think the point of practice is to engage our life. But I think when we're busy, we don't actually engage our life. So we need to actually sit down and be with our mind in this intimate kind of way.
There's no external input, you know? There's nobody there. There's no guy not looking at you in the right way. There's no, like, approval or disapproval from your boss. There's no, like, parents to say anything. And for me, for the first, like, 3 weeks, I just cried. I had everything I could possibly need. It was just me. And yet I was in despair. But I've realized that the source of all my pain and suffering comes from inside. And it comes from my mind. And that's the same for everybody. And that means that we all do so much unnecessary suffering.
You know, if you can show that short term, 4, 8 weeks, half an hour a day, already brings significant change in your health, in preventing depression. So this is a great service. And then much longer term, 10,000, 50,000 hours of meditation, that there are deep changes in your brain, in the functioning of your brain.
When we examine these long-term practitioners, we do see that their brains are different from the get-go.
Everything looks good. We're going to set up for the first scan. This is going to be 8 seconds.
With these long-term practitioners, it's just a kind of stable bedrock of equanimity. There's a kind of panoramic awareness where they're able to just take in the large presence of the moment.
For me, from the point of view of practicing all of this, it's how naturally and easily can I continue to let go and let go and let go and open up to what I'm really feeling without judgment and without some big story and without some big effort.
Sedung gom jo ti yongi yen ro do sa nyar kare yen gom yongi de tijondo yo kare. Soge de de chumbal la yo mari.
Then people might consider more seriously bringing this in a secular way, as His Holiness recommends, in education. In jails.
So I'm going to play you the beginning of the chanting.
In all kinds of professional situations.
where my practice is meeting my professional life more and more, even with my most anxious clients, just being there and helping them breathe. This shows you definitely have enough, so let's prioritize things that give you joy in the present moment rather than trying to build more for the future that may never come.
So it's very powerful for Western people because you don't have to turn away from your life to realize the teachings. You have to turn towards your life.
My life right now is, like the bee's knees, right? Now that I'm just, I guess part of it is that I'm comfortable with it now. If you stick with it, eventually something's gonna happen. If something's not happening, then you have to do the reflection, like, yo, what's going on? There's not too much other things, that complicates life, at least at this point. I'm just doing what I want to do.
Today, on the occasion of the IBD Rime Geshe graduation ceremony, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. This event, I feel, is an invaluable symbol of educational privilege and opportunity for women. And I greatly appreciate the opening of this new door for women who have completed their studies in Buddhist philosophy.
Happiness is kind of a funny word or a loaded word, but for like the last 9 years of my time in prison, my abiding state of mind became one of tremendous cheerfulness and joy, which was kind of bizarre. I had to keep it to myself. Kind of the burden of our whole me thing kind of dissipates or falls away altogether, at least for a second or two. And we're just there, and there's no problem. One thing I'll say is that all the hospice training in the world doesn't prepare us to lose our loved ones.
I often joke that you got through the floodlights and the watchdogs and everything, and we still found our way to each other. And
most of us keep all these little defenses up or these little parts of ourselves that, you can't go there, Dharma, that's my territory. Denise didn't do that. When she found out she was faced with dying, she just let it in.
Anger and fear will absolutely do you no good.
For the last several months, our home just became a retreat center and a practice community.
I have arrived at the time of death, adopting you in the attitude of the enlightened state of mind, friendliness and compassion, and attain perfect enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings.
Denise died in 2008, September 3rd. When you see it in these kind of rubber meets the road situations, you really get this tremendous confidence of how powerful the Dharma is, how transformative it is.
So when I started, I knew that some transformation would take place. I had no idea The depth to which, I think what happens is you break down what seems real and what is real. And what I think you get to, or try to get to, is that the only thing that's real is that you're aware. By far, what you give up is absolutely no comparison to what you gain. It's like completely pales in comparison, even though my hair was pretty. Do the practice.
I really think Dharma helps people.
Hi, Daddy.
Actually helps them in their lives.
So I'm so happy you guys are all here. That's so sweet of you to come.
Imagine that a cure for suffering has been found. And think for a minute what a big deal that is.
This may be the time in which Buddha Dharma can do the greatest good, and also when the time when there's the greatest need.
Because it actually gives us skillful means by which we can transform our own suffering and increase our capacity to stay present in a world that may become much more challenging. What's really needed is relatively realized people at whatever level of realization out in the world showing up and being helpful.
I think the future of Buddhism is really in the West. Future teacher, future teacher, future teacher, future teacher, future teacher, future teacher.
Dharma is a healing path, not a fixing path, you know. And a healing path, I think, has more to do with our ability to bear witness.
Bodhicitta is you are acting, thinking selflessly for others.
Whatever I'm struggling with, you know, the magic of knowing that you can transform that moment.
The person who cuts you off on the freeway, and the grocery clerk who's kind of chomping her gum and ignoring you when you say hi, and you just have no idea.
It's not mere compassion. It's like a kind of energy of compassion that spreads out, you know, and kind of influences people, and things change.
If you have more love, it's better. If you have healthy love, even better. If you have a compassion, it's better for you, better for others. If you have an insight that when your conflict comes inside of you, you know how to let it go, that's also good things.
This is Buddhism coming to the West, and we should rejoice in our good fortune. And we should probably do something with that good fortune.
The only remedy to me, in a sort of like a global level and individual level, is this new revolution of a care, you know, interdependent care. And that revolution could possibly save one's own life.
see you, good.
And we as a human being can save the planet.
We are forced to be enlightened. Otherwise, it would drive us crazy.
From now on, I will ask you to sit now and then in silence and ask this question. Am I ready to let go of everything?
Wonder who has the magic to make the sun appear every morning. Who makes that bird on the elegant tree chirp? Breath, pulse, music, dew, sunset, the burning embers of the fall. There is unfathomable joy in all that. Life is a stream, it flows on its own. Life is a stream, it flows on its own. No one knows why we are here. Stop trying to figure out the great mystery. The tea in front of you is getting cold. Drink it, enjoy every drop of it, and dance. Dance until there is no more dancer. It is the dance without dancer. This is how great mystics dance.